Today we're going to take a look at some of my past design work. Hi, I'm Alexis. I'm a former graphic designer who is trying to get back into graphic design. Today we're going to take a look at some of the work that I've done in the past, either in undergrad or for my first graphic design position. We're going to be looking at the work through a few lenses, and we're actually going to be ranking it based on whether I would put this work in my portfolio today or whether I would take the time to tweak it to make it a little bit better. I'm going to be judging it on 4 categories. The first category is type. We're going to be looking at how the type is used in the design, whether the typeface is appropriate, makes sense for the design, and just how the type is laid out. The second category we're going to be looking at is the image or graphics included in the design, and again, whether they make sense with the design. The third category is composition. And last, we're going to give it an overall score between 0 and 5. 0 being trash, not worth including in my portfolio, and 5 being something that I would put in my portfolio today without having to retouch it. Let's dive in. All right, the first design we're going to talk about is this self design. This was an assignment in one of my undergrad graphic design classes where we basically had to create a poster or a graphic that included inspiration, that included artists and things that inspired our work. And so I created this design. It has many of the different things that inspired me at that time, some of which still inspire me to this day. I will say I remember presenting this project, and I remember my classmates either not liking it or not understanding it, and it always puzzled me because I loved this design. I was so satisfied once I finished it. So I included some of my interest and my inspirations, like Salvador Dali, and then I have little ants marching because in Salvador Dali's work, he had a lot of ants. He included ants in his work. There's a photographer who I was really inspired by who did some interesting, weird things that caught my attention. And I was inspired and still am inspired by a lot of texture. So I like to include a lot of different types of texture in my designs. And so you'll see that with like Zentangles and texture, hand lettering, and even the artists that I was inspired by incorporated a lot of texture in their work. I love this design, I still do. One of my favorite parts for Salvador Dali is the little line that's pointing toward him, but it's curved, almost like the persistence of memory. That painting with the melting clocks, I wanted to incorporate that. So that and the ants are my favorite part of this. And I love the striking color. To this day, I still don't understand why my classmates didn't get it or didn't like it, but I still love it. I still stand by it, love it. If I'm gonna rate this, as far as type goes, I have to go back and look at what typeface this is, but I do remember being obsessed with those slab serifs at the end. I'll give this a 3. The typeface definitely represented me because I was really interested in this slab type. So I'll give it a 3. For the images and the graphics, I'll give that a 4 because I really do think that, one, they're done well, besides this, maybe a 3, besides this kind of pixelated part. I'll give it a 3. I do think that the images they make sense for the composition, and I think that they represent what I was going for, so I'll give it a 3. For the composition, I think that it's a 4. You have a good amount of negative space, but the different parts of the design don't feel crowded with one another. And I like that they're kind of angled in different directions. It gives it a little bit of visual interest. So my overall score out of 0 through 5 would be, I'll give this a 3. I don't think there's much I would change about it. There are a few things like making sure that the image for representing texture isn't pixelated. But I think that if this was something that I thought would be good in my portfolio, I would put it in my portfolio to this day without making that many changes. This is a holiday card that I created for the office that I worked for. After I graduated from my undergrad program, I actually worked for the university that I attended for undergrad, and I worked there for about a year before I went to grad school. And in that time, I created a lot of designs. This was one of them. So I created a holiday card for the department that I worked for at the school. The first thing I'm going to point out that I am absolutely obsessed with to this day is the hand lettering that I did for the word holidays. I still love it. I still stand by it. I still think it looks great. I think it's fun and playful. And zooming in, I just noticed that I also did some kind of squiggles in the corner where the quote unquote snow is to give it a little bit more texture. I think that's a great touch. Everything else is pretty standard. This also is a logo that I created. It's upside down, but it was a logo I made for the department that I worked in. And I recently found out that to this day, the office is still using this logo. And I made this logo 10 years ago. So, point of pride for me. So this is the outside of the card. This is the inside of the card. These were photos from different events. Anytime I created a design where I'm using photos from the department's archive, I was tasked with making sure that they were diverse, not just with the people that were represented, but also just the different activities that the department put on. So not just showing fun activities, but also making sure that the academic side was represented too. And so pretty standard. I got the playful arrangement of the photos and then a sans serif typeface in the inside of the card. I also continue to do those squiggles in the corner, which are pretty cool. I don't remember doing that part. I absolutely remember doing the hand lettering. That was my favorite. So if I'm going to judge the type, just based off this hand lettering, I'm giving it a 5 out of 5. Love it. Wouldn't change it. Think it's great. I also want to point out this little snowflake that I made. Sorry this image is pixelated, but the little snowflake for the dot in the eye. Love that too. I handmade that as well. For the image and the graphics, I think the images on the inside represent the different initiatives that the department put on. I think it's a good representation of that. So I'm going to give that a 5. The composition is pretty simple, but I think everything is laid out nicely. Again, there's nice negative space. You know, if someone were sending this card and wanted to address it or sign it, they could. There's plenty of space for that. I think the photos, I like the way that they're kind of overlapping each other, almost like a photo book or a scrapbook. And I like how the front is laid out as well. You have the name of the department at the bottom, and then the main greeting is nice and large for you to be able to see. The overall score, I think I'll give this a 5. I would absolutely put this in my portfolio today without making any changes. I don't really see anything that needs to change. So 5 out of 5. The next design we're going to talk about is a poster that I created for a music event, Scrap Arts Music. This was an assignment in my undergrad graphic design class. There's actually 2 versions of this poster. This is the first version. In the second version, the type is a little bit different. This is the second version. They both have the same amount of information, and they both use this found object kind of collage typeface, but the information about the event is different. The typeface and the layout is different. So let's talk about the first version. You can tell that this is a first version. It is a little bit crowded. still having the found typeface collage kind of vibe. I still think that works, but I do think that the type is, although there's hierarchy, they're kind of competing. Every block is kind of competing for your attention instead of making sure that the most important parts are highlighted. I think the second version does a little bit better, but I still think that the type could use work. So since I'm already judging this, for the first version, I would rate the type a 2 out of 5. Everything is readable, but I think the information is competing because of the hierarchy. I don't think the most important things are actually being highlighted. This is a nice catchphrase, but this is not the most important thing on this poster. And the city is also not necessarily the most important thing after the name of the festival. So I think this first version gets a 2 out of 5. The second version is better as far as the hierarchy of the type goes, but I do still think it needs to be worked out. I think that the blurb is a little bit too small. I do think it does need to be smaller than the date. I do think switching the location of the description and the date and location, I think that would be better. I would rate the second version of this a 3 out of 5. I think it's almost there, but it still needs to be switched around a little bit. I haven't mentioned this yet, but I still to this day love this collage found object kind of typeface. I actually made this myself. I took individual pictures of each of the letters and arranged them however I needed to arrange them, and then I cut them out on Photoshop and place them on this cardboard background. So I think that the name of the festival in this typeface is really, really good. I think it represents what the festival is about, which is basically musicians creating their own instruments out of found objects. So it's kind of representing that feel, that scrappy feel of the festival using found objects. I literally found in like a junk drawer in my mom's house. So I think it captures that vibe very well. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna bump this up to a 4 just because of this main typeface. I think it really works. For the second version, again, the only thing that I would change would be switching where the informational paragraph is and switching that with where the date is. And I think that would help with the hierarchy a little bit better. For the graphics or the image, the only thing that I would really consider an image in this, even though I know that the letters in the Scrap Arts music, I know that they're photos because I took them myself. I wouldn't consider those as graphics or image for this because I would mostly consider those as a typeface. So the graphic or image that I'm going to consider is the cardboard background, and I think that's pretty successful. It has that cardboard texture, you know what you're looking at, but it doesn't take away from the composition. It only adds to that kind of scrappy feel. So I think that's successful. It's a nice quality picture of the cardboard, so I would give that a 5 out of 5. For the composition, we already talked about the first version. It's too crowded, it's too overwhelming, the hierarchy is not great. So I would give that a 2 out of 5. It's not horrible, but it's also not great either. Second version, I would give that a 4 out of 5. I think, again, the negative space is pretty good with the space around the main Scrap Arts music typeface. I think that the spacing between each of these blocks is pretty good. I think the most successful block of text would actually be this where the phone number and the website are. I think that's pretty successful, but the other two need work. So I would give that a 4 out of 5. Overall score of this would probably be a 4 out of 5 for the second version. I think this is pretty good. There just needs to be a few tweaks made. This was a project where we had to combine two different products into one cohesive design. And I wanted to play with masculinity and femininity in a design. And so I thought of one of the most masculine products, which was Jack Daniels to me, and one of the most feminine products to me, which was Summer's Eve body wash or feminine wash. And I created this design. One thing about the learning process for me is that I have to enjoy it in order to be able to engage in it. And so a lot of the projects, even in my graduate program, incorporated humor in them. And this was one of the projects that I incorporated my humor into. So not only did I design the labels using the Jack Daniels aesthetic, I also created a physical product that used those designs. So I printed everything out. I spray painted a bottle of Summer's Eve feminine wash black, and I attached the label that I created to the bottle to make it look like it was a real product. So judging the type, I give this a 5 out of 5. I remember painstakingly trying to find a typeface that matched the label of Jack Daniels. And I found a typeface that was almost exactly the same typeface, the word feminine. I made that by hand because I couldn't find a typeface that was similar to the word Tennessee on the Jack Daniels bottle. And everything else, I remember just painstakingly going through my font library and finding typefaces that matched what I was trying to do. Because if you notice on the Jack Daniels label, there are several different typefaces. And so I tried to match the wording that was on the Summer's Eve bottle with the typeface from the Jack Daniels bottle. And so I give this a 5 out of 5. I think it's a really successful job. It looks very, very similar, if not the same. For images and graphics, I will count these little flourishes on the sides and this kind of graphic in the middle. I did all those by hand, and I think they look pretty good. They're a little wobbly, so I would give those a 4 out of 5. But I do think that the layout of them, they don't exactly match the delicateness of the Jack Daniels flourishes on the label. But I do think that they're a pretty good job. So I'll give those a 4 out of 5. They could be better. They could be a little neater and a little more fluid, but I do think that it's a pretty good job. I like what I was going for, and I like what I did. For the composition, it's a little hard to judge the composition because I am copying an existing composition. I think as far as the assignment goes, I think it's a 5 out of 5. I think the tightness of the Jack Daniels label is represented. I do have more negative space in my design than the actual label of Jack Daniels, but I think it's successful. I think with the shape of the bottle, it matches because I don't think it would make sense to fill in these negative spaces. I think it gives it more breathing room. So I give that a 5 out of 5. This is a pretty successful design. I would include this in my portfolio. I would include this in like a side project part of my portfolio, just showing off my personality and my design skills. But I would put this in my portfolio. I think this is a successful design. 5 out of 5. That's all the work that I'm going to show today. I might do another video showing some of my other design work. I have a whole hard drive full of work. So if you're interested in that, why don't you give me a like to let me know that you like this video and are interested in more content from me. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. If you want to subscribe, feel free to. I'm Alexis, and I'll see you in the next video.